History is filled with larger-than-life figures, isn't it? We hear about the Caesars, the Alexanders, the Napoleons. Their stories are carved into the very stone of our civilization. But what if I told you about a ruler so disruptive, so unconventional, that the most powerful empires of their time conspired to erase them from history altogether? This isn't a story about a forgotten king who lost a battle. This is about a leader who broke every rule, challenged every norm, and built an empire on principles that were centuries ahead of their time, only to be deliberately buried by the tides of history. This is the story of a figure whose name you probably won't and find in your standard history textbook. Why? Because they were too dangerous. Not dangerous in the way a warlord is, but dangerous to the very idea of what an empire was supposed to be. In an age of brutal conquest, rigid hierarchy, and absolute power, this ruler envisioned something different. A society built not on fear, but on cooperation. Not on subjugation, but on mutual respect. This vision was so radical, so threatening to the established order, that neighboring empires saw them not just as a rival, but as an existential threat to their way of life. To understand how truly revolutionary this leader was, we need to paint a picture of their world. Imagine empires built on the backs of slaves, where succession was decided by bloodshed in the palace, and where foreign cultures were either assimilated by force or wiped out. The game was simple: conquer, exploit, and expand. Power was absolute, and mercy was a weakness. This was the brutal reality for millions. Into this world steps our forgotten ruler. They didn't inherit a throne through a bloody coup or a preordained lineage. Instead, they rose to power through sheer charisma, brilliant strategy, and a promise that was utterly unheard of. A promise of a better, fairer world. From the very beginning, their rule was a study in contrasts. While other emperors were building massive, intimidating monuments to themselves, this leader was investing in public infrastructure for the common person. Clean water systems, public granaries to prevent famine, and roads that connected not just armies, but merchants and ordinary people. While others were imposing a single-state religion and language, this ruler created a multicultural, multilingual state where diversity wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. Scholars, artists, and thinkers from all corners of the known world were invited to their court, not as subjects, but as equals. Can you imagine the shockwaves this sent through the old empires? A place where your birth didn't determine your worth, where your ideas were more valuable than your sword. It was unthinkable. The military strategy was just as unorthodox. This wasn't about annihilation. When faced with an enemy, the first option was always diplomacy, and it wasn't a pretense. They offered trade agreements, alliances, and mutual defense pacts. Their terms were so reasonable, so beneficial, that many smaller kingdoms and city-states willingly joined their sphere of influence without a single drop of blood being shed. They were building an empire through attraction, not conquest. This made them incredibly unpredictable. How do you fight an enemy who doesn't want to fight, but who still keeps winning? Who turns your sworn enemies into their loyal allies simply by offering them a better deal? Of course, not everyone was won over by diplomacy. When war was unavoidable, their military was a formidable force, but again, it operated on different principles. They were pioneers of psychological warfare. Instead of brute force, they'd often use brilliant flanking maneuvers, deception, and surprise attacks that minimized casualties on both sides. Prisoners of war weren't executed or enslaved, which was the standard practice. Instead, they were treated humanely. Many were even given the option to return home or join the ruler's own diverse society. This tactic was genius. Soldiers from opposing armies began to wonder why they were fighting for kings who would see them die for a patch of dirt, when they could be part of a society that valued their lives. Desertions from enemy ranks became a serious problem for rival empires. The internal policies were even more radical. Think about this. In an era where women were largely seen as property, this ruler promoted women to positions of power. There were female governors, generals, and advisors in their inner circle. They established laws that protected the rights of commoners against exploitation by the nobility. A system of justice was created that was, for its time, astonishingly fair. A farmer could bring a grievance against a powerful lord and actually expect a fair hearing. This wasn't just governance. It was a social revolution. They were dismantling the very structures of aristocracy and patriarchy that every other civilization was built upon. So you have this thriving, progressive, and powerful new force in the world. Why were they forgotten? The answer is simple. The old empires finally realized they couldn't compete. They couldn't adapt. Their entire system was based on a foundation of inequality and exploitation that this new ruler was proving to be obsolete. If their ideas spread, the nobles would lose their power, the priests their authority, and the emperors their thrones. They were facing a crisis of ideology. So they did what threatened powers always do. They united. A grand coalition of old guard empires was formed. For years, they had been squabbling amongst themselves, but now they had a common enemy, one whose very existence threatened them all. They launched a coordinated, multi-front war. It was a war of annihilation, not just against an army, but against an idea. The fighting was brutal and lasted for years. Despite their brilliant strategies and the fierce loyalty of their people, our ruler's empire was outnumbered and surrounded. The coalition wasn't just aiming for victory. They were aiming for erasure. When the capital finally fell, the conquerors showed no mercy. This wasn't like our ruler's humane treatment of prisoners. Cities were razed to the ground. Libraries containing decades of accumulated knowledge, philosophy, and science were systematically burned. The goal was to wipe out every trace of this progressive civilization. But destroying buildings and people wasn't enough. They had to destroy the memory. This is where the story takes its darkest turn. The victorious empires began a systematic campaign of historical revisionism. They commissioned their own historians to write new accounts of the era, accounts in which our ruler was either completely omitted or portrayed as a minor, insignificant barbarian chieftain. Any scribes, poets, or historians from the fallen empire who survived were hunted down and silenced. Allied kingdoms that had benefited from their rule were forced to destroy any records or monuments dedicated to them. It was a coordinated, deliberate, and chillingly effective effort to delete a person and an entire philosophy of governance from the pages of history. They wanted to make sure that no one would ever again be inspired by such a dangerous idea as a fair and equitable society. For centuries, it worked. The name of the ruler, the name of their empire, the story of their radical experiment in civilization, it all vanished. It became a ghost, a whisper in the footnotes of other empires' glorious histories. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That history isn't just a record of what happened, but a story told by the winners. And the winners can choose who gets remembered and who gets forgotten. So how do we even know this story? Because you can't erase an idea completely. Fragments survived. An inscription on a buried stone found by a farmer in a remote field. A handful of coins unearthed in a distant land, bearing a face that matched no known king. A passage in a foreign text from a rival empire, complaining about a strange leader who fought with kindness and poisoned the minds of our soldiers with promises of freedom. For centuries, these were just scattered, disconnected puzzle pieces. It wasn't until modern archaeology and the painstaking work of a few maverick historians that these pieces began to come together. By cross-referencing these fragments, using new technologies to read faded texts, and daring to question the official histories written by the victors, they began to reconstruct this incredible story. They pieced together the tale of the forgotten ruler, the one who was too progressive, too successful, and too dangerous to be remembered. This story is a powerful reminder that the history we learn is often an edited version of the past. It makes you wonder how many other stories, how many other remarkable figures have been deliberately scrubbed from the record. This ruler dared to build a world based on principles we still struggle to achieve today: equality, diversity, justice, and diplomacy over war. They proved that it was possible. And for that, the powers of their time decided they had to be forgotten. But as we've seen, truth has a way of resurfacing even after centuries of being buried. The story of this forgotten ruler isn't just a fascinating piece of lost history. It's a testament to the enduring power of progressive ideas and a challenge for us to always question the stories we are told. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the lost pages of history. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the past's greatest mysteries. Let me know in the comments what you think. Could a society like this truly exist in the ancient world? Until next time, keep questioning.